Hello guys, my name is Nelson Viegas. I'm a high performance trainer, and one question is very common that my clients and the people that I speak all the time, they ask me is there any difference between an obese people that try to lose weight and eutrophic people? So what are the metabolic changes that happen when people try to lose weight, and for them becomes much harder to lose weight than for other people? So today I brought this topic here for you guys to understand, like in a physiological way, what are the differences, for you guys to understand that yes, there are differences and you can fix those differences, okay? But let's go to the biochemistry, because you guys know I like biochemistry. So what is the first factor that makes the obese people be so difficult to lose weight? First, there are metabolic changes like a reduction of conversion from T4 to T3 and increase the conversion from T4 to T3 reverse. So make a very fast explanation. We have in our thyroid, we produce a hormone called T4. This T4 is inactive, okay? So we need to convert the T4 into T3. We have a small conversion in the thyroid, but that T3 is used just inside the thyroid. So that T4 goes to the body, and in the periphery, like in the muscles, in the kidneys, in the liver, in the intestines, it's present there, three enzymes that we call deiodinases. So we have deiodinase type 1, deiodinase type 2, and deiodinase type 3, that they convert T4 into T3 or into T3 reverse. So what happens is, when we produce T4 to activate our metabolism, we convert T4 by the action of deiodinase type 1 and deiodinase type 2, we convert into T3, active hormone. So we accelerate our metabolism. Imagine T3 as accelerator of the car. But we have another enzyme called deiodinase type 3. See the name. Deiodinase, it means that remove one iodine, because T4 means one tyrosine and 4 iodines. T3 means 1 tyrosine and 3 iodines. So the deiodinase type 1 and deiodinase type 2, especially type 2, removes 1 iodine from a position in a T4 molecule. So the T4 becomes T3. But deiodinase type 3, when the metabolism is slower, so when the person starts making a diet, losing calories, going to a restrict diet, the body tries to defend himself by stop producing D1, we're going to call it D1 and D2, so deiodinase type 1, deiodinase type 2, and increases the deiodinase type 3. So it starts converting, instead of converting T4 into its active form T3, it starts converting T4 into T3 reverse, which is an inactive also hormone. So see T3 reverse as a brake. We call the hibernation hormone. So now, instead of putting the foot on an accelerator to accelerate the metabolism, you are removing the foot from the accelerator and you are putting the foot on the brake. So your metabolism starts slowing down due to this fact, and also because of the adaptive thermogenesis. Okay, so that's the first factor. The second factor is, physiologically, the appetite increases between 90 to 100 kilocalograms per kilo lost, because leptin, T3, GLP-1, that stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, GYP, CCK, which is called cytokinin, these hormones are responsible for the empty of the stomach, and peptide YY drops and ghrelin increases. So what happens? The satiation, it's reduced, so the person don't feel satiated anymore, and the ghrelin increases, okay? So this happens in an arcuate nucleus. So we have, in our brain, we have a part of our brain called arcuate nucleus. In an arcuate nucleus, you have two types of neurons. The neurons PONC, propionmelanocortin, and the neurons CART, cocaine, amphetamine regulator transcript. These two types of neurons, what they do is they inhibit gene agouti and neuropeptide Y. These two gene agouti and neuropeptide Y, they activate ghrelin. So when these hormones, they bind, that's why when they bind to the PONC and the CART, they inhibit the hunger. That's why nowadays these new medicines, Ozempic, Mounjaro, they are GLP-1 analogs. So they mimic these hormones exactly to mimic the PONC and the CART and inhibit the gene agouti and the neuropeptide Y. So the third aspect is the metabolic syndrome. So increases the metabolic syndrome symptoms. The fourth, unbalance between firmicutes and bacteroidetes. So what is firmicutes and bacteroidetes? Firmicutes and bacteroidetes is our gram-positive bacteria that we have in our intestines and gram-negative bacteria. We know now that people that are obese, they have different quantities of bacteria in their intestines. So mostly they have bacteria that they are used to process and digest more simple carbs and saturated fats. So what happens is this type of people, when you do a physics test to these people and you check, you see that they have a huge amount of bacteria that they are pro-obesity. On the contrary, people that they are skinny, they have complete different type of bacteria. So you can see that they don't gain weight very easily due to the fact that they don't have too much of this bacteria, especially the gram-negative bacteria. Because, like I'm going to explain here, what is the difference of this? So unbalance between firmicutes and bacteroidetes that leads to increase of lipopolysaccharides, we call LPS, that activate toll-like receptor 2 and toll-like receptor 4, that increases TNF-alpha and decreases cellular protein called GNK, that blocks GLUT4 on the muscle cells. So make a long story short here, try to explain this in a very, very fast way. The membrane of the gram-positive bacteria are made of peptidoglycans. And the membrane of the bacteria, the gram-negative bacteria, they are made of lipopolysaccharides. So when they die, obviously this remains, stays in your intestines. This LPS, this lipopolysaccharides, so the membrane of the gram-negative bacteria, they somehow infiltrate in our enterocytes. So they can go inside, passing we call the tight junction. We have three proteins there called claudin, zonulin, and occludin. So these three proteins, they make the tight junction. So they make the enterocytes tight and together. These people, most of them, they have dysbiosis and they have leaky gut. So leaky gut is when the enterocytes, they start opening. So these tight junctions are very weak. And these lipopolysaccharides, they pass through the enterocytes and they interact with these two receptors here. Toll-like receptor 2, toll-like receptor 4. What activates this toll-like receptor 2 and toll-like receptor 4? Beside the LPS, it's simple sugars, processed foods, and saturated fats. So, as you can see, and when you activate this toll-like receptor 2, toll-like receptor 4, you increase TNF-alpha. TNF-alpha is tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is a pro-inflammatory cytokine that increases the protein called GNK. This GNK goes to the muscle and blocks GLUT4. So for the glucose to go inside the muscle, it needs to pass through the membrane of the cell, okay? That's why we produce insulin. So insulin binds to its receptor, IRS1, insulin binds to the receptor, and as we have a cascade, PI3K, PKA, and gives the information to the GLUT4. GLUT4 is glucose transporter 4, that it's inside the muscle cells. Now this GLUT4 comes to the membrane and acts like a straw, so allows the sugar to go inside the cell to do the process of glycolysis. So for you to remove the sugar from the blood and put inside the cell to do the glycolysis, to go to the Krebs cycle, to go to the electrotransport chain and produce ATP, you need to mobilize the GLUT4. This protein, GNK, blocks GLUT4. So now GLUT4 cannot come out and go to the membrane. So we have more blood sugar. And this blood sugar goes to the hepatocytes in your liver and creates fatty liver and other situations, increasing triglycerides, increasing inflammation, and whatever. So another thing that drops is FIAF. FIAF stands for fasting induced adipocyte factor. So this happens in your adipocytes. We have this FIAF here. So FIAF drops. So we have a reduction of also insulin sensitivity in your adipocytes. Another thing that happens is lipoprotein lipase increasing fat storage. So people that are obese, they increase. Who is lipoprotein lipase? Lipoprotein lipase is a lipase that is present on the membrane of the adipocyte, of the fat cell. So what is the job of this LPL, lipoprotein lipase? Is pick up the fatty acids that comes from the chylomicrons and the VLDL and put these fatty acids inside the adipocyte to create triglycerides and to make fat storage. You understand? So these people that are obese, they do this process very easy because they have lipoprotein lipase increased. What increases lipoprotein lipase is insulin. Okay, so insulin is one factor that increases lipoprotein lipase. So another thing that also increases is called Takeda G receptor 5. So this Takeda G receptor 5 drops inhibiting deiodinase type 2. As I explained earlier, deiodinase type 2 is the enzyme responsible for converting T4 into T3. So when this Takeda G receptor drops, he inhibits the deiodinase type 2. So also another thing that happens is this JAK-STAT3 increase leading to SOX3 activation, creating leptin-resistant hypothalamus. So what happens is, for example, we know that leptin is a hormone that creates satiation in the long term. So we think like this, okay, so leptin, where do we produce leptin? We produce leptin in our fat tissue. So our fat tissue produces leptin. Okay, so if I'm fat, I have lots of leptin, right? So why I'm not feel satiated when I eat? Exactly because you have leptin resistance. So you produce leptin, but when the leptin goes to the hypothalamus, like it says here, and it's supposed to do its job, which is give the signaling of stop eating and we have too much energy and you need to reduce our appetite, that doesn't happen. So increases the leptin resistance because increases this JAK-STAT3 leading to a SOX3 activation. This SOX3 blocks the receptor of leptin. Another thing that happened is this SREBPC1 and CHREBP transcription factors increases activating acetyl-CoA carboxylase that converts acetyl-CoA into malonyl-CoA. So again, make a long story short, who is acetyl-CoA carboxylase? It's when you have an excess of ATP in your cell, so in your mitochondria, so what happens is everything that comes from fat or comes from glucose, it's converted to acetyl-CoA. This acetyl-CoA goes inside the Krebs cycle as 8 stages, and the NAD and the FAD removes they pick up the H plus that are contained in the macronutrients and send them to the electrotransport chain. In the electrotransport chain, we have the complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, and complex 4. So every time the NAD goes to complex 1, the FAD goes to complex 2. When they pass to these complexes, they remove the H plus and send to the outer part of the membrane of the mitochondria. So there is a huge amount of H plus protons, okay? So it sends that these H plus protons, they stay on top of this membrane. In the end of complex 1, 2, 3, and 4, we have something called ATP synthase that produces ATP. That's why the name is ATP synthase. So this H plus, it comes through the ATP synthase, and the ATP synthase spins and creates ATP. After the ATP synthase, we have another protein called UCP1, uncoupling protein 1, that is responsible for producing heat. For example, in our brown fat tissue, we have the white fat tissue, the beige fat tissue, and we have the brown fat tissue. We have lots of expression of UCP1. That's why some thermogenics that we use, they work on this UCP1, but this I can explain this in another video, what supplements really work on this UCP1 to, instead of picking up the H plus and send the H plus to the ATP synthase, the ATP synthase spins and creates ATP, some of these H plus are directed to the UCP1 to produce heat. So make a long story short, when you produce this excess of ATP, so this ATP goes to the Krebs cycle again and inhibits an enzyme there called isocitrate dehydrogenase. This enzyme converts isocitrate into alpha-ketoglutarate. Okay, what happened is, what is the importance of it? Why we are saying these names? Because when the ATP allosterically inhibits this enzyme, it means that the Krebs cycle stops. So you don't have production of energy because you already have too much ATP. So there is too much energy, there is too much ATP. So the body keeps producing ATP, ATP, ATP. And the Krebs cycle says, come on, it's too much ATP. It's too much energy. What people call calories, you know, like excess of calories. Not calories, it's excess of ATP. The Krebs cycle says, okay, Kalas, done. I will inhibit this enzyme. So the enzyme that converts isocitrate to alpha-ketoglutarate is inhibited. So the isocitrate, it's not converted into alpha-ketoglutarate, it's going back to citrate. Why the body does that? Because you have receptors in our membrane of our mitochondria for citrate. So now this citrate can go out of the mitochondria and go inside the cell. Inside the cell we have an enzyme they are called citrate lyase that breaks down the citrate into oxaloacetate and acetyl-CoA. This that I explained you, these transcription factors, they activate the acetyl-CoA carboxylase. So they pick up the acetyl-CoA and they convert acetyl-CoA into malonyl-CoA. And malonyl-CoA, by the enzyme fatty acid synthase, it converts malonyl-CoA into palmitic acid. What is palmitic acid? It's fat. So this is how you gain fat with excess of calories. Okay, as you can see, it's not excess of calories, it's excess of ATP that on the Krebs cycle allosterically inhibits an enzyme called isocitrate dehydrogenase that blocks the Krebs cycle and makes the citrate goes out of the mitochondria and goes to the cell, and it's now storing fat in the cell by this process. Okay, so then systemic inflammation increase. So what happens is most of these people that have excess of weight, especially visceral fat is the most dangerous fat, they have an increase of systemic or low-grade inflammation via NF-kappa beta, TNF alpha, MCP1. MCP1 is a protein responsible for converting the monocytes into macrophages M1. So monocytes and macrophages M1 increases, which is inflammatory. Epoxy-induced factor 1 alpha increases. So what is this HIF? Epoxy means no oxygen. So when people gain fat, what happens in the fat tissue? The fat tissue, we don't really produce more fat cells. The production of fat cells is very low. What we have is hypertrophy of the fat cells. So the fat cell stretches. So imagine that you have capillaries in the middle of the fat cells, because for this fat to be stored and this fat to be burned, so for the fat to get out of the adipocyte or for the fat to go in, you have to have a capillary, right? You have to have blood flow. Now imagine you have a blood flow like this. Now when you start gaining fat, what's happening? It's your adipocytes, they increase the size so that they start squeezing the capillary until there is no oxygen, until they suffer from necrosis. Okay, so the problem is now it's very difficult for you to lose fat because your vessels, your capillaries are completely compressed, and then you start producing this cytokine, this inflammatory cytokine called epoxy-induced factor 1 alpha. Another thing that also increases is interleukin 1 beta, which is this interleukin 1 beta. It's also inflammatory. Interleukin 6, also inflammatory. Interferon gamma. Plasminogen activator inhibitor 1, which is, we call it PI1. This is very important because this is the cause of blood clots. And resistin also increases. Resistin also is an inflammatory cytokine that increases inflammation. So, as you can see, there is lots of changes in an obese person that we need to pay attention. So it's not just calories in and calories out. Oh, just go to the gym. Oh, just do this. As you can see, I spoke about thyroid. I spoke about the brain. I spoke about the arcuate nucleus. I spoke about inflammation. I spoke about metabolic syndrome. So there is a huge amount of factors that we can help this person with the diet, because the diet is the most easiest way to drop calories, to drop ATP, and obviously do some physical activity to create the physiological adaptations and the physiological adjustments for this person to become more effective in burning fat. Because a person does sports, what's happening? Everything that person eats, he knows that goes in a way which is to burn. People that are obese and sedentary, they don't know this pathway. Everything that they eat goes to the other way because they are sedentary, they are inactive, they don't walk at least, we consider 8,000 steps, but I never advise my client to do 8,000 steps. I always advise them to do minimum 10,000 steps plus per day. We call the NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which for me, it's very important, not just the training itself, because usually the training is 1 hour, 1 hour and 10 minutes, 1 hour and 20 minutes, so you cannot burn too much calories inside the training. So what we do in the training is try to create some type of mitochondrial biogenesis, activating PGC1 alpha and activating transcription factors that makes your body produce more mitochondria. A muscle cell can have between 500 mitochondria until 10,000 mitochondria. So of course, if I have more mitochondria in a 24-hour period, I can burn much more calories than if I have 500. So the goal is not to have 500, the goal is to have 10,000. So that's what the training does. The training increases the number of mitochondria inside the muscle. So why you use the training? We don't use the training to burn fat. We use the training to increase the number of mitochondria. Mitochondria do what we call mitochondrial biogenesis. That's why we use the training. So most people, they look at the watches, always worry, oh, I'm going to lose 500 calories today, 600 calories, 1,000 calories. But most of those watches, most of those cardio machines, they are overestimated. So the number that is not real, it's not even fat. You're not even burning fat. You are burning everything. You're burning ATP, you're burning glycogen, you're burning intramuscular triglycerides, you're burning subcutaneous triglycerides, you're burning visceral fats, you're burning lots of things. So it's not just fat that you are burning. So you're burning lots of things, but you are creating physiological adaptations. And the main one, the principal one, is increasing the number of mitochondria that makes you burn more calories in a 24-hour period. So it's very important to train every day. It's even more important to stay active every day. So make sure you walk a lot and make sure you walk at least 10,000 steps per day to have some type of physical activity, to be active, to burn more calories at the same time. Control the diet, because in the end of the day, if you don't control the diet, try to use more omega-3 types of fat, eat more fish, eat more vegetables and fruits, try to reduce the red meat. I don't say stop eating red meat because it's a nonsense, but at least reduce, eat 3-4 times per week. Don't eat more than that. Try to eat more fish, chicken, and this type of, like lots of fibers, so fruits and vegetables, like I said. Try to have at least 8 to 9 pieces of fruit per day. So try to have a healthy lifestyle, also drinking at least 30 to 50 milliliters of water per day to have a good hydration, because diet is important, training is important, sleeping is very important, but hydration also important, okay? Thank you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Now you know the differences between an eutrophic person and an obese person, and what is the metabolic changes that we need to look when you prepare a diet and a training. This is what professional coaches they do. This is what professional nutritionists they do. It's not what coaches, most of the coaches, they say, oh, it's calories in, calories out, okay? Thank you so much. Please share, please like and subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.